IT, and I'll call us to order once it's done. So just council, for those that weren't here, we do have eScribe for our agendas now, but just a reminder, we're not going to use eScribe for voting today. We'll start voting with it on Monday. So today's just the old show of hands through Zoom for voting. Anyways, for IT, I'll call the meeting to order in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome everybody for the February 16th, 2021 Infrastructure and Economic Development Committee meeting. I appreciate everybody being here. The members of this committee are myself, Councillor Thiessen, Councillor Blackburn, and Mayor Clayton. And I know to begin, we've got a delegation from Nautical Energy, which came at the invitation of council. So really appreciate you folks coming in. I see I hope I'm saying it right, but Mr. Pokar, you waved first, so maybe I'll introduce you and I'll let you introduce your compatriots.
Hey, thank you very much. Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity to meet everybody. I really look forward to being able to do this in person instead of over a Zoom call. I'm sure we're all quite tired of Zoom meetings, but I do appreciate your time. So my name is Rob Pokar. I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer at Nautical Energy. And in that role, it really is my responsibility to drive sustainability and sustainable practices into everything we do. And that includes the way that we engage and benefit all of our communities. So thank you for the opportunity to give you an update about our project. You know, I've had a long relationship with Grande Prairie. I was formerly the CEO of a company called Matrix Solutions, which is an environmental consulting business. And Matrix has had an office in Grande Prairie for over 20 years. So really proud to have had a long-standing relationship with the city. So with that, I'll let Bill introduce himself, and then he can in turn introduce Terry. Go ahead, Bill.
Again, to echo Rob's comments, thanks for making the time for us. Yeah, I guess I'll have to one-up Rob from the standpoint of how long I've been in Grande Prairie. When I came out west from the center of the universe, also known as Toronto, I escaped. Basically, I worked my EIT years for Nova Gas up in Fairview. So I used to go to Grande Prairie for excitement on the weekends. And that was back in 1982, 84 timeframe. So love the countryside up there, love the city, great people, real entrepreneurial. And, you know, I'm not going to swear, but I really detest all this freaking electronic stuff. I'm a people person. I like to meet, people in person. Good to see you, Yad. Anyway, so my history, mechanical engineer by training, but have been very lucky in my career. I've done a whole bunch of stuff, but virtually all of it is related to capital project planning and execution. Been with Nautical since August 2019. I've been fortunate enough to come up and visit several times, meeting some of the councillors, some of the business people, and I'm looking forward to it again. So anyway, Terry, take it away.
Good morning. It's great to see everyone again, and I'm sure I will see you in the short term as our economy in Grande Prairie opens up. I'm thrilled to have on the team working alongside me, Bill Somerville. He is our VP of Project Execution, so his main role will be liaisoning between PCL and Wood as the project gets up and rolling, and with suppliers and contractors. And by having Rob Pokar from our board join as the Chief Sustainability Officer, he provides me that ability to connect provincially and federally, as well as on the equity capitalization of Nautical. So this opportunity to be able to answer some of the questions that you may have about the project is essential to us. So I want to thank everyone for taking the time today. As Nautical advances and we capitalize the company, there are there's federal avenues that we can pursue by having the project declared in the public interest. So with this statement, the municipal, provincial, and Indigenous governments, if they're able to provide further certainty towards these avenues federally, it is of a huge benefit to Nautical. It also strengthens our international profile that the Grande Prairie region in Alberta is open for investment. So that's where the ask initiated from. in regards to wanting a public letter of support. And I did provide a deck, but we're not going to do a deck flip. That deck is for information. If you want to have a look at it, reach out to us at any time for further clarity. But I thought, Rob, if you could spend a couple of minutes and maybe just talk a little bit about the Singapore joint venture that we have created at the end of last year and what that means for the company moving forward.
Yeah, thank you, Terry. So it was a really important decision that we made in late 2020 to establish a joint venture with a large commodity trading business that's based in Singapore. And it's really important for two reasons. One is that it allows us to directly market our methanol, and the second is it gives us direct access to Asian capital. And so for the first point, so methanol gets used as a petrochemical ingredient to make things like glues and plastics that you see in your house and in your cars. And that's about half the market. The other half of the market for methanol is as a clean fuel that displaces dirty fuels like coal or bunker fuel. And that is the growth part of the market. So the part of the global methanol market that is growing the fastest is in clean fuels. And geographically, that fuel is centered in Asia. And so we are going to target that part of the market because it's growing. It helps us realize higher prices, and it helps us maximize the environmental benefits of our project. Because if we target the clean fuel as a substitute fuels, we get to displace dirty fuels. And so our joint venture allows us to directly market our fuels. The other thing is that this is a very expensive project. We need over $3 billion to develop this project. And the biggest source for capital for a project like this is in Asia. And now we have a central office in Singapore, direct access to Asian investors, and it makes us, we always have been an international company because of our markets, but now it gives us an operating presence in Asia as well. So that is a really great development.
Great. So just when you're talking about this, about the project, just mostly maybe for the benefit of the people, the members of the public that might be watching, what is the project that you're asking for a letter of support for?
Rob?
Yeah, go ahead. Do you want to answer that, Terry?
No, over to you, Rob.
Okay, no, thank you. So our project is a methanol project. It's located just immediately south of Grande Prairie. It will be built in two phases. The first, and each phase will produce a product called methanol. So methanol is a product that is derived from natural gas. So we will consume natural gas, we will process that natural gas, and we will produce methanol. We will load that methanol into a series of, or into a unit train, which will ship the methanol off to the West Coast. We have a transportation agreement with CN. We have a terminaling agreement in Prince Rupert. So that will work out. That will be able to take Alberta, Northwest Alberta natural gas and turn it into a value-added product, and then ship that product overseas. By changing natural gas into methanol, we dramatically increase the value of that product, which increases the economic opportunities in Northwest Alberta for ourselves, for the city, for the natural gas producers that we buy the product from. So at a high level, is that enough detail at a high level?
Yeah, I definitely think it is. Really appreciate getting more information, and maybe I'll turn it over and I'll see if anybody on committee or council has any specific questions they're hoping to hear from you folks. Councillor Blackburn and then Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you, Councillor Bressie, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here today to talk to us about your letter. One of the things that wasn't clear to me from the letter is why you need a letter of support, and what would the nature of that letter be that would be useful for you. I can't tell whether there's an issue with getting approvals or whether it's a problem with funding. There was nothing in the letter to kind of indicate why you were looking for support?
Thanks for that question. I can answer that. And it's we've gone to Ottawa to source out other federal opportunities that exist for projects like nautical. And the Canadian Infrastructure Bank does have a project acceleration fund. That project acceleration fund, we are in the due diligence process with Canadian Infrastructure Bank and in the assessment phase right now. With this acceleration fund, it's to help projects like nautical. So what interested them is our ability with our Indigenous communities and government support. You know, we have the County of Grande Prairie has helped us in regards to the land purchase down Resources Road, as well as we have Indigenous communities that have become equity participants and shareholders in the company. The Project Acceleration Fund at Canadian Infrastructure Bank, if we're declared methanol as a low carbon fuel, that would unlock millions of dollars for the project. One of the hurdles that we'll have to clear with them once we get to the stage is that the project is deemed in the public interest from the provincial government. So we also know that our Indigenous governments, including within Treaty 8 and our municipal governments, are an important piece of nautical. So the ask came to municipal governments basically for that. I hope that answers your question. We presented the same information to the MD of Greenview and the County of Grande Prairie with success as well. Does that answer, Clyde?
Great.
Yes, thank you very much.
Then I saw Councillor Thiessen with a question and followed by Councillor Minhas.
Thank you very much, Chair Bressie, and thanks everyone for being in here, Rob, Bill, and Terry. I guess my question just is in regards to the letter. So in the letter, it mentioned something about the environmental social governance framework as a priority, and that it was included. Now, with the letter that came to Council, that wasn't included. Now, has that been given to the regional municipalities, or was that just submitted with the province and the federal government?
I'll ask Rob to provide clarity around this, around our carbon capture situation and our blue methanol and what we're doing in terms of regulatory and environment. I think Rob is probably the most qualified to answer that for you, Chris.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, no, thank you. So in terms of the overall framework for ESG, it really is part of the DNA of the business. All through the planning of this project, we have focused on minimizing the environmental impact and maximizing the local benefit for this project. So for example, the site is located on a formal gravel pit to minimize land impact. The water demand is using an existing water treatment plant from International Paper so that we can use an existing license. We can use existing infrastructure to clean our wastewater. The project, as it was designed in 2020, would have the lowest greenhouse gas emissions of any methanol project in the world. But we didn't stop there. What we decided and asked our technology provider to do is provide us options so that we could lower that greenhouse gas emissions intensity even lower. And so we've been doing a lot of work over many months to generate that technical solution, and now we're very confident that we have that solution. And so within the last few weeks, we've decided that we will pursue a blue methanol. We will be a blue methanol producer, meaning that we will capture our CO2 and we will sequester our CO2 into a deep geologic formation. So we have been able to clear this technical hurdle so that we're confident to be able to capture that CO2 effectively at our plant. And we've identified many geologic targets in the region. So we have to round out that technical solution and make sure that we now do the detailed engineering to do this safely. So those details will come, but we're confident enough now that we were able to publicly announce that strategy, that we will be a blue methanol producer. We will aim to be a net zero producer. But our goal is that when we start this plant, we will be the lowest greenhouse gas emissions by a mile. We were already the lowest. We now plan to reduce those emissions by another 80%. And so we will continue to share those plans as we build up those solutions and strategies. But everything that we have done around the design of the project and the implementation of the project, has really been around world-leading environmental performance, and that won't change. We see that there will be ongoing opportunities over the life of this plant to improve its performance as technology develops, and I think this recent decision to switch to full carbon capture sequestration is just a recent example of game-changing performance improvements that we can implement.
And so just a couple of extra things, Chris, to add on to Rob's answer. In addition to the greenhouse gas, a significant continual reduction, there is a significant reduction in NOx and other pollutants down to virtually zero, 90, 97, 98%. So that's a thing. And then the second piece, going back to Rob's portfolio and our corporate sustainability, it does go beyond the environmental piece. And so, we're fleshing out and going to continue to build on our success already with respect to how does sustainability actually extend into our supply chains up to who we buy gas from, who we buy our electricity from, and actually putting the focus on our environmental and social sustainability beyond just the plant as to upstream and downstream how we work with our partners.
Well, that's all really great stuff, guys. Love to hear that. I don't know if Terry told you I got a bit of an environmental bend. But I guess just a quick question in regards to that environmental social governance document. Have you submitted that to the county, MD, city, or province?
No, that has not been submitted yet. We'll be working alongside our Indigenous leaders as well to refine that, Chris.
Okay.
And I sit on a Chemistry Industry Association of Canada panel where we actually provide feedback to the province of Alberta for their hydrogen strategy. Their hydrogen strategy, in our opinion, does have the ability to not only include blue hydrogen, but blue methanol, and what are those impacts into our Indigenous communities. So it has not yet been completed. Rob is spearheading that component with Gerald Feschuk. And once it is available, we'll more than, if you're interested to see that, we would look forward to sharing that with you as well.
Beautiful. Thanks so much for all your answers. I appreciate it.
Councillor Minhas.
Thank you very much for Rob and Tracy and Bill to coming up updated, but I think I got most of the answer Clyde already asked, but it was in my mind. But I really appreciate what you guys are doing, and this will help us and the public to know what you guys are doing, because this is open public meeting today and updating. And for me, one question is for the Singapore deal, you guys working with it, that letter needed to help, that letter will help that to promote your business to do that, convince those people outside of Canada to invest money into our region?
I'll ask Rob to speak to this, but quite often when Mark sends his regrets today, he was stuck in another capital meeting, so he couldn't attend. But quite often they look at Canada and they, there was one comment made about, do we have political risk insurance? So definitely, this would, I believe, assist in that as we go further down the path. But Rob, what would you have to add to that?
Yeah, I think that the company has done a really good job in terms of engaging with the community, doing environmental impact assessments, has had great success gathering regulatory approval for the project. And we really view that as sort of the minimum amount of work that we need to do. It is really important that this is going to be a very long life project, and we need to make sure that we stay engaged with our communities throughout the life of the project, and make sure that we continue to earn that reputation and that trust that this project is in the public interest. And so this isn't something that we look for a one-time event. It's throughout the life of this project, we have to remain in the public interest. Right now, though, a letter, stating that we are in the public interest is valuable for us in terms of our capital raising ability. And it's important that we go to international markets and be able to demonstrate that we have the support of the local community. For an investor, that reduces the risk that they worry about. For the federal government, it's beneficial for the federal government to know that this project has the support of the local community so that they can make funding decisions and can look to support our project And it's useful for the provincial government as well to make sure that they can look at funding applications, or they can look at regulatory approvals and be confident that we've done our job to be able to engage and earn the support of our communities, including Grande Prairie. So a letter of support gets a lot of different audiences and allows us to speak in a positive way about our project and our communities, both nationally, provincially, and internationally.
Thank you.
Basically, our neighbors want us to be neighbors.
Yeah.
Councillor O'Toole.
Yes, thank you very much. I just got a couple of reminders for myself. What's the construction number of people that would be planned for this project?
Wonderful. Thanks, Kevin. I'd ask Bill to respond to this around timeline, DBM, and feed. I think you have the most knowledge there, Bill.
Yeah. So thanks for the question, Kevin. So in that deck that you saw, there was a couple of slides that talked about phases of project, and those things are basically industry standard that large companies utilize to plan projects effectively and then execute them. If you go back to those slides, I think it was 13 and 14 or something, you'll see that there's these phases called assess, something called DBM or phase 2. DBM stands for Design Basis Memorandum. Phase 3 is called feed or front-end engineering design, and then we execute. If I put that into a perspective of you're going to build a new house, the DBM would be, okay, this is the size of my house, how many square feet, more or less where the neighborhood is, and I'm going to have a high-level cost. Then I decided to do that. I've got the money. I want to build it. I'm going to go and I'm going to design the house, make sure I get all the details around your carpet, flooring, paint, all that sort of stuff, so I can refine and better understand how much that house is going to cost, how long it's going to take to build. Once I got all that stuff, I go to the bank, I get the money, and I build the house. So from the standpoint of how long it's going to take, DBM and feed, the front-end piece, we are estimating it should take approximately 21 to 22 months to do those two phases from the standpoint of kicking off our design basis memorandum phase. The design basis memorandum phase will kick off formally when we have secured the investment money to do that front-end work. You'll see another acronym. Project people are terrible for acronyms, FID. FID stands for Final Investment Decision. That is when the company has done all the work they've required to truly define the scope of the work, the execution plan, how long it's going to take, something called a level 3 cost estimate, which is a high degree of certainty, and a final investment decision is made to say, yes, let's build the facility. To answer your question about the number of construction jobs over the course of the whole facility, our early estimates, and it's got to be specified, this is early estimates, because we have not landed with a PCL or construction contractor all the details, but over the course of the job, it's around 5,000 construction jobs. The target number of people at site, our current estimate at the beginning where we are right now, is we'll have between 1,200 and 1,500 people on site constructing the facility. And the reason that we can't be definitive yet is because we haven't done all the work that we have to do in DBM and feed. One of the things we're trying to do to increase cost certainty and schedule certainty is something that's referred to as modularization, where we're going to try to do as much modularization or fabrication of steel and piping and these boxes of basically structural steel with piping and equipment in it in basically the Edmonton area. That way we can actually control productivity, we control quality. It's better for the employees. It's attractive work because they go home to their families at night. And so we're going to try to maximize or optimize the amount of work that's done in Edmonton, and then the remaining work gets done at site. And a lot of work has to be done at site anyway that can't be modularized. So all of the earthworks, the clearing, the grubbing, the earthworks, and then all of our foundations, piling, concrete foundations, and then bringing in all the modules, putting them on the foundations, and connecting it all up and starting up. So that's a pretty long answer, but hopefully that answered your question.
And one thing I'd like to add is right now Nautical is a staff of 12. Rob was the baker's dozen, lucky number 13. Bill, when we staff up and we capitalize the company to the next stage, we're a staff of 60, correct? And then when we go to the full plant build out, shovel in the ground, 4 years to build, how many people will be working at Nautical? Right.
So that's a good sort of add. So from the standpoint of the owner company, by the end of those first two phases we talked about, we should be around 60 full-time equivalents as the, quote, owner team managing all the contractors. It'll grow to probably around 100 mid-execute because we'll need additional people in the various work phases to provide owner oversight of the contractors. The actual estimate right now from the standpoint of the operations organization is in the range of 220 to 250 people as an operating site.
Sorry, Councillor O'Toole, it doesn't show you're muted, but we can't hear you. And now it shows you're muted, Councillor O'Toole. So I'm not quite sure what's going on. Sorry, Councillor O'Toole, we still can't hear you, but I'll come back to you in a few minutes if you want. I saw Councillor Thiessen had a question. Actually, I'll go to Councillor Thiessen next.
Thanks, Chair Bressie. I feel like you got a question coming up here too. Mine's real simple. In regards to the letter that has been asked for, what's the time sensitivity on this as far as you receiving this? Our typical process, we'll come out of here, we'll make a motion to the mayor, usually coming from all of council. I think most of council's here today, but what is the time sensitivity on that?
No time sensitivity. Rob did have the pleasure to meet with the Minister of Finance on Friday. So our ask to the province will be similar to this. We look towards administration and Bork and Glavin to advise on that. So thanks for asking, but lots of time.
Perfect. Thanks.
A question I had was, Rob, you did touch on it, but can you tell me a little bit more about how much water will be drawn and what's been done to make sure that our watershed can afford the water that's going to be drawn?
Yeah, off the top of my head, I don't have the volumetrics off the top of my head, so I'm sorry, I'll need to talk about the process as opposed to the volumes.
And that's fine. I don't understand the volumes, and if you talk numbers, that wouldn't mean anything to me anyway, so I'm more looking for the process is fine.
Yeah, so we're using the water plant that exists at the International Paper Facility. And so there's an existing water intake from the river. There's an existing license to withdraw from the river. There's an existing water treatment plant. And so we've come to an agreement with International Paper that we will be able to take the water that they currently don't have, that they are licensed to produce, but don't have any need for, and we will divert that water to our plant. We will use it. We will have a high recycle rate. The water that once we recycle the water, there will be some amount of wastewater that is generated. We will treat that water using the existing infrastructure, and then we will use an existing outflow to put that treated water back into the river. So it's important that, again, this notion of continuous improvement, in 2020, we went back to our technology provider and upgraded the process within the plant and have reduced the water demand by, I think, about 25% compared to an earlier design from about 12 months before. And that really is important for us to do in this DBM phase that Bill described. I mean, that's where we lock down the broad assumptions of the project, the amount of recycle, the source of the water, right? But this whole philosophy is great environmental performance makes great operational sense. It lowers the impact of the business. It lowers the operating costs of the business. It makes sure that we're good neighbors. It's been part of the DNA of the business. Councillor Thiessen, you talked about yourself as an environmental person. I spent 28 years in the environment industry. This is part of my DNA, and I'm just really thrilled that I've got a project that I can help, guide and lead to have world-class sustainability performance.
And I'll also add to that, to answer your question, because Gerald Feschuk, he's our VP of Environment and Regulatory. So when we first came into the community, we talked about around 20,000 cubic feet of water a day under the International Papers water license. When we switched technologies, like Rob said, that water intake decreased. However, when we went to carbon capture and storage, the water increased a little bit, but we're still within that 20,000 cubes a day.
Great. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor O'Toole.
Yeah, sorry about that Zoom thing going on here, but that's out of my hands. Just a question regarding the production of glycol, or
methanol.
Yes, methanol, sorry.
Yep.
Are any of the train cars going to be heading north, like going through Grande Prairie, or are they going to be heading south towards Jasper and then heading out to the coast that way? And once again, another question on top of that is, how many cars per day or weeks, how many cars per day or week do you feel that once production is up to max or full production, you would see leaving Grande Prairie area?
Okay, so I can answer those. So basically, the whole product logistics plan is predicated on basically 3 unit trains, 1 loading at the facility every day, 1 in transit towards the port, 1 unloading at the port and coming back. So there's basically 3 unit trains. Unit trains, I believe, are 108 cars long. And they are leaving from the rail yard that we have south of Grande Prairie that we're intending to build, and they are going south, so they will not be going north.
Thank you so much.
Are there any other questions? Well, I thank you for coming in. It was good to get some more information from you folks, and also to get it in a venue where we actually can share it with the public when we get asked questions as well. So really do appreciate your time. It definitely helps us not just make a decision on this letter, but also your project is of high interest to our community, and we do get asked about it. And so
thank you that. And
really
I leave the door open. We do have an office. We've had an office since 2018 in the city of Grande Prairie in downtown, proud member in 214 Place. So feel free to reach out to me at any time.
Cool. Awesome. Well, we appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you very much. And our administration will be in touch to let you know what's going on with the letter and what council decides on that. So thank you again for your time, and thanks for all the work you're putting into this project for our region.
You're welcome. And like Rob said before, we're dying to come up and visit in person.
We look forward to that too.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Great. Well, I will look to committee, and I think in committees we do delegation business right away. So is there anybody that would like to make a motion coming out of this? Councillor Thiessen.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair Bressie. I'll just make the motion as requested that committee direct council to direct the mayor to write a letter stating that in support of the nautical project being in the public interest.
Great. And so, sorry, is your intention with that committee just directs it, or committee recommend council direct it?
Typically, the process is to send it to council. I'm open to having it done sooner rather than later, if that's what committee decides, and council, who seems to be all around the table today, if they're amenable to it. But yeah, I can change it to committee direct, but typical process, we send it to council. I know this came from council, so yeah.
Yeah, I guess, is there anybody else that has a preference of which process we take? Councillor Blackburn.
I think it would be appropriate for us to direct administration without having to go through council.
Perfect.
Councillor Minhas?
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Yeah, so then I'm open to change my motion that committee direct the mayor to write a letter in support of the nautical project being in the public interest.
Great. Any conversation or debate on that motion? In that case, I will call to question. All in favor? And that motion carries unanimously. Any further business on this that we need to talk about? Great, then I will move on to reports. And first up, we've got an update on downtown rehab with Mr. Hoyen.
Mute, start the video.
Hey, Monty.
Morning, Doug. Well, just a quick little update. Personally, I'm continuing the inventory of all the businesses in the downtown core, all the affected businesses. As I say, because even phase 3, there's some in phase 3 that will have impact. Our group is continuing to do the land agreements for some of the businesses, some of the buildings that have about a 6-foot easement in front of their property that is their property, but we will be working on. And Connor's working on that extensively. On the 18th, this Thursday, we'll be doing a dry run of the construction information session, which will be held on the 23rd next week to work out some of the kinks. And currently, we're close to having our construction information signage up around the downtown core to announce that in May, construction will begin. So that's basically what we have at this point in time. It's short and sweet. So I'm available for questions.
Great. Any questions? I know one I've got is, do you know offhand how many people have signed up for that information session so far?
I don't have that, but I can get that for you, Dylan.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. Just an email to council would be fine by me for that.
Okay.
Great. Any other questions? Councillor O'Toole.
Yes, I was just wondering if you've actually gone door to door and talked to the business owners or the building owner, for that matter.
I have done all the new businesses that have filled empty spaces to this point in time. I haven't contacted the ones that I had previously contacted, but there's new businesses, and I'm trying to get email contacts and everything like that. So I have been going to the businesses that have filled new spaces, or the old spaces, basically. So,
okay, thank you.
Mayor Clayton.
Thanks, Chair Bressie. Mr. Hoynen, question in regards to the connection north-south and east-west at CIBC there. I understand that at some point the entire intersection will be closed. Can you give me a bit more in details of how long that will take place and when approximately?
Can I just give you a second here? Sorry. Close my door and get rid of a phone call in the background. I'm not really sure exactly. It will be more of the construction information session when the construction company will provide us with more of the traffic accommodation plans. Oh, and I have a note here, just for the last question. 45 have signed up for the construction information session to this point, Dylan.
Great, thank you.
Chair Bressie, if I could, I have a second one. Thank you. Monty, do you know then, I understand there was talk of two-way traffic on, I think that would be considered phase 3, while it's closed at the intersection. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
I believe that will be happening. It's basically the same thing we did before in regards to when we had to do some work there. We will turn it into a two-way street with a turnaround on the east end, so that the businesses will be impacted, but a little bit less at that on 100th Avenue between 100th Street and 101st Street.
So when will these details be finalized?
Basically, the construction information session will be addressing our traffic accommodation plans at that time, next Wednesday. And at that point in time, like, we will be revisiting those to make sure that they completely fit our needs, but they will be shown at the construction information session.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Great. Well, thank you for being here today. We appreciate you starting to do these regular check-ins with us as we ramp up for the season.
Sounds good. Thanks very much.
Thank you. With that, I'll move on to item 3.2, which is Director Service Area Report from Director Glavin.
Chair Bressie will start with economic development. To date, they've completed 208 business outreach surveys. We've covered a number of topics, obviously including COVID, support services and assistance with calculating occupancy limits, as well as city services such as referrals to the mobile outreach program downtown. In the Serving Up Knowledge webinar series is paused this week for Growing the North, and will continue next Thursday with a session on Facebook newsfeed optimization, as well as food photography on March 4th. For the economic recovery grants, under the local marketing grant, $84,000 has been awarded to 33 projects involving 36 businesses and organizations. $108,000 has been awarded to 8 beautification projects. In energy and environment, the Eastlink combined heat and power construction was halted last week due to the temperatures. It was not feasible for them to do the construction outdoors with the temperatures, and it's restarted again this week. There will be a planned electrical shutdown at Eastlink from February 26th to March 1st, affecting only the Eastlink Center for the electrical tie-in for that project. As well, Energy is doing electrical scans of the North Fire Hall and Curling Club, as both those facilities have been deemed to be somewhat underperforming, and they're looking to optimize the energy usage in those facilities. In engineering services, we've posted the local road rehab phase 1 tender, the bridge rehab and maintenance tender, as well as the road rehab phase 2 tender. As well, there have been a number of closed tenders, road rehab phase 1 for Mission and West Side Plaza, geometric upgrades and traffic signals for 108th Avenue and 96th Street, sidewalk construction phase 2 tender, and as Monty alluded to, the downtown rehabilitation phase 4 stakeholder meeting is scheduled for February 23rd. In planning and development, we're currently developing a communications plan for the final steps of the College Park area redevelopment plan. In transportation, the last round of residential snow removal should be done tomorrow. Sign crews are currently working on labeling for Eastlink piping systems, as well as repairing damaged and decaying parking lot signage at numerous city facilities. And signal crews are also out performing annual cabinet inspections and maintenance at our signals. In parks, we've closed tender for some new tree planting that will begin in May, as well as we have posted for a parks operations supervisor, as our previous parks operations supervisor took a job in Port Alberni on Vancouver Island. So we're actively in the recruitment phase for that one. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Director Glavin? Councillor Thiessen.
Thanks, Chair Bressie. Thanks for the update, Director Glavin. Just a question. Prior to getting into this meeting, I was talking on the phone with the resident in Patterson. He had a question I couldn't answer, so I wondered if you might be able to answer it. What is our city procedure on how long we leave windrows in the middle of the road acting as lane dividers?
Thanks, Chair Bressie. Typically what happens is that we complete all of the priority 1 and priority 2 roads. So the arterial roads being priority 1 and all of the bus routes being priority 2. Upon completion of that, we then start swapping some of the staff that are on graders or plow trucks into driving dump trucks, or the plow trucks with dumps, and the blower. So depending on the volume of snow, it could be, a couple of days before we get onto the blower, or it could be more than a week. If there's a particular area that got missed or there's of concern, please have either yourself or them reach out to us and we'll get it picked up.
Awesome. Done. And that's the answer I gave as best I could. So I guess I was on the right track. Thanks for that, Director Clavin.
Great. Any other questions? Great. Well, thank you, Director Glavin. We appreciate the update. And with that, I will move on to item 3.3, barrier-free grant with Ms. Lee.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Bressie. Administration is recommending that committee recommend council approve policy 356, being the barrier-free grant, and approve $250,000 from the economic recovery capital budget. At the November 2nd City Council meeting, Council directed administration to bring back to the appropriate standing committee a draft policy to create an accessibility improvement grant for businesses within the city. As a little bit of background information, the city currently has two incentive programs available for businesses in order to incentivize improvements or investments in their buildings. They're both designed very similarly, one being the facade improvement grant and the other being the beautification and patio grant that's currently within the economic recovery program. Both of these programs are designed to incentivize businesses to invest in their buildings. And while neither of them are specifically designed to address accessibility improvements, we have seen a number of those as a byproduct of these projects, with many businesses using the grant program as an opportunity to invest in automatic doors or ramps. The challenge with that is the way those programs are designed. Businesses are required to hit a certain number of design goals out of a full list of about 25, one of those being accessibility. So in addition to meeting accessibility criteria, they also need to meet lighting or greenery or other aesthetic focused guidelines. So as I mentioned, accessibility can be a very happy byproduct of that program. It wasn't necessarily the intent that it was designed for. And additionally, one of the challenges with those programs when it comes to accessibility is they are specifically facade programs, so really focusing on the front face of the building and doesn't really take into consideration the entire property and the boundaries and other accessibility challenges that may come with entering the property. So based on those considerations, administration has designed a proposed grant program, which we have called the barrier-free grant. And it is designed with the specific goal of incentivizing businesses and property owners to invest in removing any physical, architectural, or technological barriers that present persons with physical, cognitive, or sensory disabilities from accessing or using public commercial spaces on an equal basis with others. In terms of the mechanisms of the grant, it would be very similar to the existing grants, where it is a 50% matching grant based on the hard cost of the project to a maximum of $10,000 for any accessibility improvement project that improves access and safety. So one of the, I guess, differences with this program is the type of projects that this grant would improve. We have included in the agenda package today, just for council's background information, a draft of the proposed program guidelines, really to illustrate the types of projects that we're looking to cover with this project. These guidelines will be approved at the procedure level through the city manager's office. However, it does hit on a couple of different nuances that are unique from the existing grant programs, including exterior pedestrian access routes and parking lot improvements. We heard through our engagement with the Accessibility Advisory Committee that one of the biggest concerns was accessing properties. Recognizing the work that the engineering department has done on improving mobility and accessibility across the city through their sidewalk program, we realized that there's a little bit of a gap where we may have taken into consideration sidewalk and access to a property, but quite often once it comes to that private property line, patrons are sort of ending up in the middle of a parking lot or in the middle of a vehicle traffic route, and there wasn't a mechanism to help incentivize those private property owners to help create a safe route of access, connecting from that public property onto the private property, and ultimately to help get patrons into the building. As I mentioned, we engaged with the Community Accessibility Committee, and they had some really great feedback for us in terms of design of the program. The one being sort of the expansion of the boundaries of where the grant would be eligible, so to encompass not only automatic doors and handrails and guards and things, but really taking into consideration the whole property, as I mentioned. The other important feedback that we had from them was the first draft of the policy was specifically designed towards businesses, being economic development. That's sort of our tunnel vision, I guess. But they did raise a really important point that many of the people that would be benefiting from this grant, some of the biggest challenges that they have was with accessing services by not-for-profit organizations and other community organizations that either own their own facility or are located within commercial properties. So they really recommended that we expand the program and open up those opportunities to include both commercial and commercial businesses and not-for-profit organizations providing services. And as well, the Accessibility Committee provided a recommendation just to expand the definition of who exactly this grant is designed to benefit in terms of ensuring that we're accommodating not just physical disabilities, but also recognizing improvements to benefit both those with cognitive and sensory disabilities as well. In terms of budget, administration is recommending that council allocate $250,000 from the Economic Recovery Grant capital budget. This would be, if council remembers, at budget deliberations, $250,000 was reallocated, I guess, out of the urban residential grant into the economic recovery. So this is money that was sort of on top of that original $500,000 that was allocated towards the economic recovery grant. As of today, within the beautification grant, we have available $542,000. Should council choose to allocate this $250,000, that would still leave $292,000 towards the beautification grant as currently designed under the economic recovery program. And with that, I will take any questions.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions from committee? I see Councillor Thiessen, then Councillor Palat, then Mayor Clayton.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rebecca. Thank you, Chair Bressie. Actually, Rebecca, you answered all my questions right at the tail end of your report. But I guess this is, just to be clear, this is a citywide initiative, and just a comment on that. So I guess that was a question. This is a citywide initiative, question mark. And I just wanted to comment that I know this council has been pretty forward about making barrier-free businesses and buildings throughout the city, and I really appreciate the level of consultation that you've done in the community to not only help businesses, but other buildings as well that might require this. And to me, if everyone subscribed at about the full amount at $10,000, that's at least 25 more buildings that will be barrier-free through it. So I want to thank you for that and the hard work that you put in to bring this forward to committee today. So back to the question. Citywide, question mark?
Through Chair Bressie, yes, the program is designed to be any eligible business or organization within the city.
Thank you. Councillor Platt.
Thanks, Chair Bressie. I guess my question's more, from building a few properties over the last few years. I'm trying to understand what the code change switched that properties were built that were barrier-free. And I'm not sure if somebody can explain that to me. I thought it was like maybe 2011 or somewhere in there that buildings had to be built that were barrier-free. And I'm just thinking, everything that's been built out in Westgate, any strip malls I've been to, they're all barrier-free already. So I guess what I'm curious about on that is, I think this is already happening, and I'm as much as I like the idea of this grant, I'm struggling with us stagnating $250,000 for this specifically, because this was supposed to be economic recovery, and although this is a great initiative, I don't think this is necessarily economic recovery. So I don't want to speak against us doing something for this. I just think for $250,000, I'm not sure this is really providing a lot of economic recovery to the community, and that's what this money was originally earmarked for. So I don't think I could support it in its current form. I'm not a voting member, but when it comes to council, I think for me, this isn't creating a lot of economic recovery. I think it's a great initiative for barrier-free, and it's a great initiative to try to get more businesses set up like that. I guess I'd be curious to ask administration, how many people have come forward that this has been something they want? And maybe the funding money is just too much for me. I'm just struggling trying to think of, I go in and out of an awful lot of businesses. I'm really struggling to think of 25 businesses I think that could even take advantage of this. I just want to see this money stagnated. So, Rebecca, can you give me an idea of how many businesses have come forward that said they would even access a grant like this?
Thank you, through the chair. To sort of address maybe a couple of the questions that you have through there, Councillor Plott. I won't try to speak to the code changes. I'm certainly not a technical expert, but through conversations with our inspection services and engineering, as well as the accessibility, the goal, when we initially started looking at this, I was trying to understand the code and the code changes. Many of the challenges that the members of the community brought forward are for businesses that are, again, I'm not a technical expert, so I don't want to go make too far of a stretch, but my understanding is that they are technically within code. It's some of those little gaps and bits and pieces that maybe just aren't actually usable or really practical for somebody with a physical disability. I mentioned previously the sidewalks. That's one example that came up with a number of different businesses across the city where the public sidewalk is accessible, but where it actually comes out, there was no consideration for the pathway and route of travel. I see Director Glavin jumping in. Maybe he wants to address the code changes there.
Yeah, go ahead, Director Glavin.
I'm actually not going to take a stab at the code right now, but that's certainly something that we can get back at. One of the things that was brought up by the community in being that accessibility group was not so much the buildings and issues under the building code. It was more so gaps in pedestrian connections where, you know, there would be a trail. Like the example I would use would be South 40 right now. So we have 6-foot asphalt trails along 108th Street and along 84th Avenue, but there's no pedestrian connection into that entire development. And that was one of the examples that was brought up, is that there's no sidewalks leading to any of those businesses. So you can get to the development, but you can't get to the business. So that would be one of the examples that this group came up with.
Okay. And I guess that's where I'm trying to get my head around who would even apply for this, because when I think of those kind of examples, I think Director Glavin's bang on. Do I think that they're going to go out and try to put in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of the sidewalks and try to redo their site plan? Probably not. So I'm just struggling with this one, and I guess maybe being the chair of the Economic Recovery Committee, I know that committee is working on other things, and I'm very concerned about taking $250,000 and stagnating it, and this might sit there for an awfully long time and not get utilized. And for me, I think that money was earmarked to get money back into the community as soon as possible, and I don't think this is going to do that. I really would be concerned that we could have $250,000 that could sit around our bank account for a few years. And so if it was a lesser amount and we were doing it as a pilot project, I could probably be in support of that. But for $250,000, I think it's a big stretch at this point, especially when it caps out at 10 and thinking of 25 projects. I just spend a lot of time in this community. I guess I personally don't see 25 projects unless we're talking about road improvements. And that's not a landlord or a business's responsibility. That's the municipalities. So I feel like we're doing a good job of that already. So those are my comments, I guess. I'll leave it for there, and I'm curious to see what the rest of the committee and council is thinking.
Mayor Clayton.
Thanks, Chair Bressie. I too have some concerns, as Councillor Plott mentioned. A couple of things, though, that do give me some hope. I know from a personal experience of renovating a building recently that making barrier-free space for something as simple as a washroom is an added value. So if you were to buy a new space that didn't have an accessible washroom right now, it's a fairly significant increase to the cost on making that facility barrier-free. Adding doors at this point aren't mandatory, but that's definitely a nice addition to a building when you're doing renovations. And these little touches create some economy. You hire some contractors, you do some work on them. Do I think that it needs a $250,000 line attached to it? Not necessarily. I wonder, my question for Ms. Lee, was there any consideration as adding this as another criteria item for either of the existing funds that we have right now, in beautification or in facade improvement? And I know it doesn't really fit in facade per se, but we've added patios and demolition to other programs. So was there any consideration of adding this to an existing program?
Thank you, through the chair. We did consider it. Ultimately felt that if the intent was to incentivize accessibility improvements, it was better suited as sort of a separate program. Just based on the way the existing programs are already designed, it was tougher to go back, I guess, and sort of rejig those. And possibly it would be possible. The concern would be losing, I guess, the intent of those original programs and really with the goal of really making this one clearly defined for accessibility. The recommendation for it to come out of the economic recovery was recognizing how similar these programs are. Although designed with the accessibility intent, it's still creating an economic generator, just as you mentioned, around contractors and subtrades and things, which is where some of that rationale came from.
Go ahead, Mayor Clayton, and then I see Councillor Blackburn.
Thanks, Chair Bressie. Ms. Lee, can you tell me, I don't recall, is there a timeline on the existing beautification of facade programs? I know council had modified to remove, some criteria prior, but to my knowledge, they don't expire. Is there timelines or considerations given for this grant? And sort of echoing on Councillor Plott's comments, to tie up money that's not being utilized in hopes of creating economy, I don't know if that's necessarily the best use for our money when we could take the money and put it into places that get put into fruition in a much quicker pace. So what are the timelines we're looking for to sort of earmark this money for?
So to answer to the existing programs first, for the Downtown Incentives Program, Council had previously removed the facade improvement program. When Phase 4 there was a Council deliberations around Phase 4 and some of the incentives. Council approved $200,000 to be specifically to go specifically towards the facade improvement grants within the downtown. That money to only be available from the start of construction to the end of construction. That's the only one that has a timeline in terms of when that money is available. In terms of applications and approvals, both the downtown improvement facade grant as well as the economic recovery beautification grant, successful applicants have 1 year to complete their project from the time of approval. The proposed accessibility grant would be similar as well. So the grant money would be available until council chooses to reallocate it or until the funds are depleted. But those successful applicants, from the time they're awarded or notified of a successful application, would have 1 year to complete their project.
Great. Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Councillor Bressie. Ms. Lee, I guess the question about how much money you're proposing to set aside, I'm suspecting that you must have had a reason for choosing that number. Do you have a sense of the number of applications that we might get, and is $250,000 the right amount?
Thank you, Speaker. The number, so backing up just a little bit, the $10,000 number was based on some quotes that we got from the community looking at some of the most common improvement types. One being sort of the access ramps, and looking at sort of like the highest level of ramps, we would be looking at about a $25,000 investment. So $10,000 is sort of the high end of those. Looking at some of those sidewalk connections, likely looking at $5,000 to $10,000 when we're talking about some of those small pieces in terms of the individual projects. Looking at the 250, honestly, it was mostly a gut instinct, I guess, looking conversations with the accessibility committee. They were able to rattle off quite a few businesses that they believed would be interested. We haven't reached out directly to the businesses. Pending council approval, we wanted to ensure that we were on the right track with this, of course, before we got any hopes up. We did receive, letters of support or recommendation from some of the community organizations in the community that had heard about the grant through my presentation conversation with the accessibility committee. 25 businesses at $10,000 felt like it was a significant impact, but there really was no magic to that number, I guess.
Thank you.
Great. I see Councillor Plott. I just haven't had a chance to get in, so I'll get myself in and then I'll come to Councillor Plott. Question for you, can you walk me through this funding again? So it's from the Economic Recovery Fund. Am I understanding right that it's money that's already been set aside for other grants that will be reallocating to this, or is it completely unattached money right now?
So currently, the Economic Development, or the Advisory Committee for the Economic Recovery Subcommittee, brought forward a recommendation to Council for $500,000 to be put towards economic recovery grants. And at that time, it was the local marketing grant and the beautification grant. With the committee, at the committee, Council approved the $500,000. At the committee level, they recommended that we split that $50,000 into marketing and $450,000 into the beautification. Right off the hop, the marketing grant was very well subscribed. We saw lots of applications coming in, whereas the beautification grant was a lot more of a slower burn on that one. So the committee recommended that we reallocate and move $50,000 out of the beautification into the local marketing. So that brought the beautification down to $400,000. At Council remaining, there's still $500,000 or $450,000 of that $1 million economic recovery grant capital project that hasn't been allocated to date in the project. At Council budget deliberations, administration brought forward a recommendation for $250,000 to be added into the urban residential grant and patio grant within the downtown incentives program. At that time, Council chose to allocate that money into the economic recovery grant program. So that bumped us up to $650,000 at that point. To date, we have awarded, sorry, lots of numbers, I apologize. To date, we've awarded $108,000. So yeah, we had that original 4, we added 250, we've awarded 108, we're currently at 542 allocated to beautification specifically.
And then this would be coming out of that?
This would be coming out of that.
Okay, great, thank you. And then one, actually not other questions, but just a couple comments is for committee to consider is asking where this happens. I know that there's a lot of downtown businesses that do just need a little ramp, or they need a washroom, or they need a bit of a wider door, where I've heard people in the community say, I can't go downtown because there's a bunch of businesses and a bunch of buildings that I can't access in my wheelchair down there. And we've spent millions and millions and millions and millions at downtown. I think it'd be great to make sure that somebody in a wheelchair actually can go to the places that they want and they need to get downtown. So I think that's one example in our city of where this could be put to good use if property owners are interested. You're right, in the newer power centers, maybe not as much need, but some of those older legacy developments, it certainly is. So something I wonder if committee might be interested in discussing is I totally get the concern over, do we park this money? It's a new program. We don't know whether people will be interested or not. And so this money is just sitting there for years till it gets applied for. Maybe something, if that's a concern for a committee, maybe something we consider is putting a time frame on this and saying, hey, we're going to open this grant program for 60 days or 90 days, then ask administration to report back to council, and maybe we end it if it's undersubscribed after 60, 90 days. We don't just have to create this and park the money in this program for years until it gets used. If it takes years to get used, there are mechanisms we could use to report back or make sure it doesn't sit there for years. So if that's a concern, maybe there's solutions we want to talk about that. I see Director Glavin.
Thanks, Chair Bressy. One other alternative is to fund it temporarily out of the Downtown Incentives Program as well, as we do have some unallocated money in there. Use that as the pilot funding, and then if there's a lot of uptake, we bring it back.
I saw Councillor Plott.
Thanks, Chair Bressy. Just a question for maybe Director Glavin, but I know this council's had a lot of conversations about barrier-free. We've set aside money every year in our term to upgrade our own facilities. I think it was $50,000 a year. We're 3 years into that, and we spent on average $50,000 a year as a municipality even upgrading our own facilities.
Chair Bressy, if Director Miller is on the call, I think Facilities has been managing that fund. He may know where that is, or that might be something we need to circulate after.
Yeah, Director Miller.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Bressy. So I think it was in 2019 is when we started dedicating the $50,000 per year from council to facilities to facilitate making some changes, and they have spent the money each year. And I can send a list of the projects to council or to committee after the meeting as well.
I guess what do you know, Director Miller, have we been spending, are the monies that we've allocated, have they been spent? Have we ran out of projects, or are they just not being done yet, or are we just?
Thanks, Chair Bressy. They have been spending the majority of the money, and some years they've spent more money and they've used some of their own operational funding or capital funding towards projects. But in discussions with Mr. Phillips, we do have a plan that as long as the money is available from council, we will look for projects to improve city facilities with it to make them more accessible.
Okay, thanks for that. And so I guess on that, I just want to remind our council, we've been talking about barrier-free in our own facilities for a lot of years and still finding ways to spend money in our own facilities, and we're having a challenge doing that. So I just want to remind us, as much as I think it's a great initiative, I just don't see the uptake on this being the $250,000 movement. So I'd love to see this amount be changed to 100 or 150, maybe something that's more palatable, and see how it goes. But I'm going to say it again, I'm just really worried about earmarking this much money for economic recovery that could just sit in a bank account for a few years. And I think at this time in our economy, we definitely need to be putting this money into good use sooner than later. So I just be cautious of us putting maybe up to $150,000 could be just sitting in a savings account, maybe not the dime for savings account. So just my thoughts again.
Councillor Plott, if I could add, I'm just kind of curious. Something I'm not quite understanding is what's the difference in your mind of putting aside money for beautification or a patio grant and this? It seems like it's similar to me. So maybe I'm just not quite understanding.
To me, I guess for me, we've seen how long it takes an uptake just to even get beautification, which for a lot of business owners makes sense. It gives high property value to them. As much as a lot of businesses may want to be barrier-free, that's their prerogative, and they should choose to be up to date on that. They should choose to widen their doors and have handicap bathrooms. If they're not, I'm not convinced this grant's going to tip them over the top for $10,000 to do it. And so we've seen a lot of how much time it's taken to get uptake in the other grants and the other kinds of funding. So I'd rather see this one just be paused a little bit and see what the uptake is before we just put so much money into it. That's all.
Thank you. Well, is there any other questions or discussion, or anybody willing to make a motion? Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Councillor Bressi. I am willing to make a motion and to speak to it. And I would like to move that committee recommend council approve approve policy 356 barrier-free grant and approve $250,000 from the economic recovery capital budget. And just speaking to this, a couple of things. First off, I recognize that $250,000 is a lot of money to set aside, but I would point out that that money is already set aside in the economic recovery capital budget, so it's already just sitting there. And to assign that amount of it to this particular initiative sends a couple of messages. And the most important one being that the city is enthusiastic about seeing barrier-free work done within businesses in the city, whether it's downtown or anywhere else. And so, I think we are saying that, yeah, we would like to see this done. And although we don't know what the uptake will be, the possibility is that, according to what we learned from Ms. Lee, the possibility is that there are a number of organizations and businesses out there who may be able to and willing to take advantage of it. The other thing that I'll just point out is that we don't necessarily need to tie this money up for great long periods of time. I don't agree with the idea of putting a time limit on applications because for some businesses or organizations, it may take a fair amount of time to either decide or to organize to get something like this done within their premises. But we could say a year from now, let's have a look at what the uptake was and put some money back into the economic recovery capital budget if necessary. So let's give it an enthusiastic try. Thank you. I'll leave it at that.
Great.
Thanks, Chair Bressi. I have a question before comments on the motion. Question for Ms. Lee. I think you mentioned this. I just didn't write it down. Can you tell me, with earmarking this $250,000 item, what's left in the economic recovery capital budget that isn't earmarked for something specifically?
Thank you, through the chair. If we earmark this money, that would leave $292,000 specifically for the beautification grant. If that answers your question.
So, no, it doesn't quite.
Sorry.
There will be nothing unearmarked. There will be nothing that doesn't have a grant application assigned to it.
There would be, so the council had the $1 million.
Yeah.
550 of that has been allocated, leaving that 450, which has no program attached to it yet.
Okay.
This would not impact that 450. This would impact the 542 currently, specifically within the beautification, and that would leave of that money 292,000.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So I'd like to amend this motion. I don't disagree that there is a need for barrier-free support in our community, and I think that this does create a small amount of economic recovery. My fear is tying this money up too long. So if it could be a friendly amendment for Councillor Blackburn, or if you need it as a more formal amendment, that's fine. But I would like this brought back for review to this committee in 1 year.
So sorry, just so I can understand, the amendment you're hoping for is if this goes to council, so recommend to council, hey, do this, but also direct committee review this a year from now.
Yep, exactly.
Are you okay with that amendment, Councillor Blackburn? Would you be okay with that as a friendly amendment, or would you like it to be a formal moved one?
No, I'm okay with that. We'll leave it as a friendly amendment.
Great, thank you. Councillor Thiessen, I saw you move a bit. Are you hoping to get in, or?
Well, I just wondered if we're talking about two different things here, and so I guess I was hesitant. I was like, I think that could be its own motion. I thought when Mayor Clayton asked for a friendly amendment, I imagine it was going to be a reduction in funding, not in the review process. So I can vote for both, but now we've got two items on one motion that we're going to be discussing. And if the committee's okay with that and council's okay with that, I guess so. It seems clunky. I don't know.
It's a friendly amendment right now, so it's one motion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know.
I'd also point out that this is just a recommendation we're putting to council. If somebody wants to split these out when they came to council, they'd be more than welcome to split it out at council, so we vote on these two kind of parts of it separately at council. Right now, thanks for what actually goes to council.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chair Bressy. I was kind of up and down because I thought, well, I could split it like you suggested, though it doesn't need to be part of it, but it's fine. I'm good with both.
Mayor Clayton, Councillor Plott.
Thanks. I suggest if Councillor Thiessen has an amendment in mind in regards to the amount, that's something I would consider as well.
Councillor Plott.
Thanks, Chair Bressy. I'm fine with the amendment. I think we're going to have this conversation next week at budget or at council anyways, but I think it's important to have that conversation there. I guess I'd be a little cautious on Councillor Clayton's motion. I'm not sure what that'll do. We can review it in a year, but if there's now people in the queue that are looking at doing the project and then we pull funding, that'd be quite disheartening too. So I think to safeguard an amount, I'd be okay with. I'm not sure the review, unless we're just having a review to have a conversation. If we're going to have a review and potentially defund it then, I'd actually be more worried about that then, because I do know that the process it takes for a lot of businesses to build up, to get a case together, to get their budget together, to be able to apply for facade improvements. I would think this is going to be very similar. So I'd just be very fearful that we get 11 months in and we go, hey, the uptake's not there, and there's 15 businesses in the works of doing something, and then we have a conversation and switch it. So certainly great that it's going to get to council next week so we can have a further conversation there, but I'd be worried about us having a discussion in a year. That's why I'd rather see us defund it and not have that discussion.
Mayor Clayton.
Yeah, and the point being is that many of these items sit on our books for a long period of time. Without having an earmarked discussion in one year, it's hard for somebody to bring it back for discussion, because if they bring back the item, hey, I want to talk about defunding barrier-free projects, it's not really going to happen. No politician is going to say, hey, let's talk about defunding barrier-free project incentives. So by bringing back this project in 1 year, this discussion in 1 year, we can see how it's going. I don't think that we would ever pull the rug out from anybody that's planning or had an application in process. I'm very confident that administration would be respectful of timelines. On the other hand, I don't think economic recovery capital money sits there in perpetuity. So it's realistic that people expect a conversation on this on a regular basis. 1 year from now, this gives people time. You know what? I'm considering this. Call economic development, get information, get an application in process. And then in the meantime, when economic development is working with the community on these projects, they can remind people that this is coming back for discussion in 1 year. If it came back for discussion at that time, the council of the day decided to unfund it, I would hope that the council of the day put some parameters around when the funding would stop. So in my opinion, if we don't put a time frame for discussion, it won't come back for discussion. So that's my thought. Thanks.
Great. Councillor Blackburn, I see you. I also see Councillor Thiessen. I'm just going to get in first because I haven't had a stab at this yet. And just pointing out that I hope this goes to council and I hope it passes. And I really understand the concern of, hey, is this money that we're putting aside and we don't know whether it'll be accessed or not, and we want that money out in the community? I get that concern if this was new money that we were setting aside. I point that's already the status of this money. This money is already sitting there in a grant program that hasn't been applied for yet, that's subscribed so far, and may or may not be accessed by the community. So if we want to get money out into the community, then I think creating more avenues for it to be accessed is the more likely way for it to actually be accessed. So I share the concern of this economic recovery money not being tapped. That's one reason why I think this is a good program. I also like that it does barrier-free stuff, but I think from an economic recovery perspective, it makes sense to create more avenues for this money to actually get spent. So I hope that this will pass today and it'll pass the council. I saw Councillor Blackburn. Are you hoping that I come back to you to close eventually, or did you have a question you wanted to ask?
I just wanted to comment. I don't think that I will need to close on this one, but I did want to just comment on the question of looking back at it in a year. I don't think we would be thinking about defunding the program. I think really what we're concerned about is whether or not there's money sitting there tied up that's not being applied for. And it would simply be a matter of reviewing the amount of money that remains available for grants if after a year we find that the uptake is less than we anticipated. So I think it's a pretty safe move to say, let's look at this again in a year. And I hope that in a year's time, we'll remember that the question is about whether or not we've tied up too much money. Thanks.
Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Chair Bressie. Thanks for everyone's sort of chip in. I appreciate Mayor Clayton's the discussion points and all that. I guess the question that is sort of floating in my head right now is, in a year, whether it's fully subscribed or not, are we going to have a funding pot to even discuss about? So it's all well and good right now, and if it gets fully subscribed, that money's gone. But are we keeping this program in perpetuity as part of our budget? Was this just for economic stimulus, as I understand it to be, and helping out our local businesses? This was a program that we did bring back. So in a year's time, we're already past budget. So if the next council decides, hey, we don't have the money to do this kind of stimulus anymore, then there won't be a pot to discuss any money in unless there's money sitting in the pot still from the previous, from this year. So I guess that's, I'm leaning in. I appreciate what Mayor Clayton said, but I'm trying to, I think it's making a couple assumptions here that this is going to keep traveling forward, and I don't know if this is a moot conversation a year from now. Maybe 6 months from now and prior to budget with the new council, it could be perfect. But a year from now, I don't know. So anyways, we got to vote on the amendment and then on the motion. So let's get to her.
Great. Well, and I think it was a friendly amendment. So we're just going to vote on the motion, not the amendment to it. But again, this is just a recommendation to council. There definitely would be opportunity to rehash this and move amendments at council if people are so inclined. Is there any further discussion on this? In that case, I will call it to question. All in favor? And that motion carries. And with that, I think we can move on to item 3.4, update of the waiver of fees policy, and that is Mr. DeRoche.
Thank you, Chairperson Bressie. Going to share my presentation here. Thank you. So the policy 318 is the economic incentives policy, and we're proposing to introduce a fee waiver component. So currently, policy 318 has two elements, the marketing grant and the beautification grant. And we're proposing to add a waiver of fees for restaurants and bars looking to change their operations to diversify in a way that will help them respond to challenges related to COVID. So the waiver of fees would apply to a change of use between any of the following types of businesses. So restaurants, drinking establishments major or minor, or restaurant and drinking establishments major or minor. And the reason this came about is back in October when we introduced the new definition to the land use bylaw, restaurant and drinking establishment major and minor, that would allow businesses to have minors during the day and operate similar to a family restaurant, but prohibit minors in the evening and operate more like a bar or nighttime entertainment facility. we were hoping to enable businesses to adopt to COVID and also just address that gap in our bylaw. And by exploring this, the idea came about that anyone looking to take advantage of this would have to pay a change of use fee, and that could be a hindrance to a business that's already struggling from challenges related to COVID. And so if they're looking to take advantage of this new use, why not make it easier for them by waiving the development fee? It was a very simple incentive that we can move forward, and it's not necessarily a cost to the city in terms of asking for new funds. It's merely a loss of income from these fees in the event that we get these applications. And so the value is $400 where the use is permitted and $800 where the use is discretionary. So that would be the value of the fee that we're waiving. In order to be eligible, your business would have to have been in operation at least 6 months, have seen a loss of 30% or more revenue due to COVID, employ at least one person aside from yourself, and have current property taxes paid. The proposed revision includes a retroactivity clause that would make businesses that have applied for such a change of use after October 5th eligible to being reimbursed for their application fee. There's only one business that has had such an application in this period, so it would only be one potential reimbursement. And the reason for this date is because that is the date that the new definition became effective. So based on the ability to support businesses in diversifying their operations to adapt to COVID-related challenges, we're recommending that committee recommend that council adopt revised policy 318 as presented. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Just looking at committee, are there any questions? Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you, Chair Bressie. Thank you, Mr. DeRoche, for this report and policy. I think it'll be really great for restaurants trying to bounce back. Now, one of the questions I had was originally, as I was going over the report, was is there a sunset clause to this? Because it deals very much with COVID-19 and the pandemic. And I see point 3 in the policy. This policy will expire after all monies have been paid out of reserve and other funding sources. I don't know if this is a question that you can ask, but would it be better to state the actual pots of money, the reserves that we're talking about there, and or include a date? Maybe this is a question for legislative services around our policies and stuff. But
I see Director Glavin popping on.
Thanks, Chair Bressie. I wouldn't actually consider this to be a monetary expense to the city. This would just be revenue we would forego as people would typically apply for this. So it's not really directly being impacted by a funding source in this case. And I would suggest that we don't need a sunset clause on this one. Any new businesses that applied to operate like this would do so just as part of their development permit in these areas. So it would be my suggestion that we just let this go on in perpetuity. It allows any of these businesses that might want to change to something that we would have otherwise permitted now going forward. So it kind of puts them on equal footing to new businesses that are opening up.
Okay. No, thank you. So if we're going to keep that in perpetuity, then we probably don't need point 3 then of the expiry after all monies have been paid out of reserve.
So through the chair, the expiry is a clause relevant to the other components. So the marketing grant and the beautification grant that do have specific funds. The waiver of fees is just an additional component to this. And so when writing the waiver of fees component, my understanding would be that when all the monies were paid out and the other programs were ending, that this policy would be revoked and that all the relevant clauses would be, all the programs would end at the same time.
Okay. All right, I'll leave it to other people to ask questions. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Chris. And any other questions? Is anybody willing to make a motion? Councillor Thiessen.
Well, I would move that committee recommend that council adopt revised policy 318 as presented.
Great. Any discussion on that? In that case, all in favor? And motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. DeRoche. And then moving on to item 3.5, I've got a pecuniary interest to declare, so I've asked Councillor Thiessen to chair this portion of the meeting as I turn off my camera.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bressie. Chair Thiessen taking over here, and I'll hand it over to Scott Ford, our Inspection Services Manager, to present the report. Scott, the floor is yours.
Good morning. I got to apologize right off the get-go. I don't have any video capability this morning on the Zoom, so I'm going to have to do it like this. So.
You also don't sound like Scott.
Is that right? I'm here today to present an administrative report on the recommendation that the Economic Development Committee approve the applicant's request to waive the fees for the building permit 201-205. There was previous council meeting held on July 13th with an item presented for the proposed community supportive housing project. Policy 607 was adopted to ensure consistency in addressing requests for various community developments, which include city-related projects. The application is for an alteration to the building to accommodate a 44-unit community supportive housing project. The applicant is requesting the building permit in the amount of $40,156 to be waived. There are no negative impacts associated with this application. However, the approval of this application would provide additional housing to those requiring the support. It's the decision of the committee to approve any requests over $2,000. The city has entered into an agreement with the applicant to lease the building for a period of 5 years. Therefore, the request for the waiver of fees application meet the intent of Policy 607, identifying it as a city-related project. Administration recommends to the Infrastructure and Economic Development Committee that the applicant's request for waiver of fees be approved. Thank you.
All right, and thank you, Mr. Ford. I will turn it over to committee and council to see if there's any questions in regards to this waiver of fees. So far, seeing none. All right, then. Anybody willing to make a motion at all? Councillor Blackburn.
I'll move as recommended.
Thank you for that, Councillor Blackburn. I'll look to members of committee or council for any discussion or debate. Seeing none, I'll call it to question. All in favor? And that is unanimous. Thank you very much, Mr. Ford, and I'll welcome Chair Bressie back into chair the meeting here, and I will step down and resign my duties as interim chair.
Great. Well, thank you, Councillor Thiessen. I appreciate it. And then moving on to our outstanding items list with Director Glavin.
Chair Bressie, one update to the list. Item 1124, accessibility improvement grants, was referred on to council today, and aside from that, everything else is on track.
Great. Could I get a motion to accept?
So moved.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Thiessen. All in favor? And motion carries. And with that, I will call this meeting adjourned. And just a reminder that we need to, with the new technology we've got, we need to take a 5-minute recess before the next committee meeting starts.
Very good. Thank you, Chair Bressie.
Great. Thank you all.
Does that mean we're not being recorded right now?
If I understand right, we're streaming but not recorded. So people on the call can still see us, but we're not streaming, I think.
So people on Zoom can still see us, but our live broadcast and our video recording are now shut down. And they will then they'll turn back on for the next